A Small and Tall Collection. Chapter 7. Delirious Decisions. This was misery. Worse than that, this was purgatory. It was suffering beyond words. Hot, cold, tingly, aching, sore, thirsty, nauseous, confused, lightheaded. Ashlynn had never experienced any sickness quite like this. The day after she ate the food was when she started feeling weird. It was just a little chill, and she thought nothing of it. At least, she didn't think anything of it until she peered down into the human world below and noticed that the two young boys were not well. It was actually the lack of sound that alerted the borrower to something weird going on. It was already too late when she realized the boys were sick. By the end of the evening, she was starting to feel more symptoms other than the chill. The usual borrower trick was to drink water and get plenty of rest, but she couldn't just wait around with sickness-contaminated food. Fresh supplies were necessary, and, sadly, she was on her own. Regret filled her heart as she threw out her well-earned borrowings from the night before, and she scurried back down to the human's apartment where she managed to snag some cracker fragments from an already opened package, which was probably safe, and a few other odds and ends like tissue paper for her running nose. Ashlynn knew herself well, and if her predictions were correct, she would be up and running in 2 or 3 days, with plenty of water to flush out whatever illness currently was plaguing her, as well as bed rest. Sadly, this was a particularly nasty virus. 1 week of feverish spikes, nibbles of cracker, followed by its reappearance, and a horrendous cough that made her chest tight and her abs hurt. Throat coated in some kind of thick mucus, Ashlynn's already thin supply was officially depleted, and she was still nowhere close to being better. She stared at the ceiling and stifled another bout of coughs, which felt weak and unproductive. Despite all of this, she forced herself to her feet, all of her blankets wrapped firmly around her shoulders, as she shuffled off toward the water tap for yet another glass of water. She was moving nowhere near what she would call a surviving speed, but the borrower thanked her lucky stars she was still able to keep herself upright. She filled her cup to the brim and sipped on the surface. It was only now she caught a glimpse of herself in the water basin, and the sight was a bit of a haunting one. Her already thin face was becoming more hollow and gaunt. It was obvious she hadn't been able to keep down food in a day or 2. She stared at her reflection. Her hip lamp flickered on and off before dimming ever so slightly. Now my battery is going to. Plus I need to get more food. I need to eat, but what? I don't have anything else. Versus, I managed to cross over the Great Ice Road and get knocked down by the common cold. What a miserable way to go. Ashlynn's mental spiral was interrupted only as she heard the humans speaking from down below. It might have been the clogging in her ears, or the fog her brain couldn't quite shake. But whatever the case, Ashlynn now noticed that there were boisterous sounds coming from down below in the apartment with the 3 humans.
But, Soren, I'm better now, see?
I don't care. Drink.
But I don't wanna. I don't wanna either.
If you 2 don't take this medicine, you'll get sick again, and we'll have to cancel our plans. Now, drink up. The argument was obviously going one way, and it was not in the 2 young boys' favor. It wasn't the fact that the human boys were speaking at a normal level, which was shattering Ashlynn's eardrums. It was the one word that pulled all focus and attention. Medicine.
Medicine? Why didn't I think of that?
Ashlynn scolded herself as she shuffled closer to the opening and peered down into the kitchen. Sure enough, Soren was holding what looked like 2 small cups of some dark teal liquid and was handing it to the boys. Both had disgusted looks on their faces. Noses scrunched, they both raised the cups to their lips and downed the contents. Instantly, both boys started coughing and gagging, which wasn't a reassuring sign. "There. Was that so hard?" asked Soren. "Now, don't forget to drink your water and then brush your teeth. Early bedtime for you both."
But Soren, it's movie night,
pouted Ray.
Yeah,
Dorian chimed in. "We'll have movie night tomorrow, if no one is hacking up a lung. Come on. I told you both it was going to be an early night this morning when we got up. Let's go, Ray. I'm looking at you," encouraged Soren as he ushered the 2 boys out of the kitchen and into the bathroom down the hall, both boys still holding the cups in their hands. She wasn't sure what possessed her, but Ashlynn found herself scuttling along as fast as she could at her molasses pace to the piece of trim that was a bit loose. Perhaps it was her dulled instinct telling her to verify what she was about to be borrowing, or maybe it was habit to check the surroundings before going down into the human world. Regardless, Ashlynn peered down and saw the ultimate jackpot right there on the youngest's bedside table. The cup that was in his hands moments ago, as well as the opened package of crackers she'd borrowed from before, were both right there. Tissues were also on the table, and, best news of the night, everyone was going to bed early. It was the perfect opportunity, and her one true shot at trying to beat this sickness.
That's my ticket. There's gotta be some of that medicine liquid stuff in the cup. I'll just go down, borrow a little, and then I'll be better in no time. Super simple, in and out. It's not an option anymore. I need food and meds, and both are on that boy's bedside table.
Ashlynn's feet felt heavy and sluggish as she finally made it back to her bed, where she began getting ready. Through the dizzy spells and bouts of nausea, the borrower finally managed to put on her warmest, most flexible clothes and headed down toward the boys' room to acquire sweet relief. She went over her checklist as she powered through her aches and pains while walking across the beams toward the entrance she'd used before to enter the infamous room. Hook, lamp, tape for hand protection.
Am I missing something? Probably not.
Ashlynn racked her mind, but each thought that came into her head felt muted, like it was something she was hearing from someone else really far away. She walked in darkness, seeing that the light from her hip lamp was hurting her eyes, and only flicked it on intermittently to better light that path temporarily. It took multiple breaks, and she had to shove her mouth into the corner of her elbow as the coughs racked her body. But Ashlynn finally managed to make it to the electrical cover by the dresser. The borrower woman crouched and slipped through the hole after listening for a minute or so and approached the edge. She looked up at the vertigo-inducing ceiling as she prepared her hook, but then something happened. Looking up triggered some wicked part of the sickness, and instantly she felt dizzy and nauseous. She choked back a cough and crouched. The bile in the back of her throat burned uncomfortably. It threatened to make her sick. It was pure luck she managed to choke down the little bit of sick that wanted to erupt out of her. Ashlynn knew she needed to act, and fast, before the sickness in her body decided to do something else rash. She swung her hook around in the rhythmic pattern, her whole body tingling and aching in protest, before she let it fly through the air. Her senses might have been dulled, but pure instinct allowed her to hit her mark on her first try. Ashlynn couldn't stop the grin spreading across her face as she gave a couple of good test tugs and realized the hook had gained purchase. The moment was short-lived as a bout of nausea and lightheadedness overtook her. Ashlynn had to lean against the rope and use it as a brace as she fought off the symptoms.
Almost there. Just a little longer. I'll get the meds, and then I'll be all right.
Ashlynn took another breath and stared at the vertigo-inducing line and began the fateful climb up. Perhaps it was a fool's errand, but Ashlynn needed this. She couldn't last much longer if she went on withering away with nothing to eat and nothing to ease her suffering. Hand over fist, she climbed the line, daring to only take a few breaks as she hoisted herself higher and higher. It wasn't until she pulled herself over the edge with her shaking arms that she let herself breathe a sigh of relief. The aching in her joints and limbs was excruciating. Her insides twisted, yearning for sustenance to replace the energy she'd just used.
Just one more minute. I just need one more minute.
Ashlynn glanced across the bedside table and spotted both the crackers and the medicine cup. She also saw the tissues, but her two greater needs were right there in front of her. Feeling more lightheaded than stuffy, Ashlynn tiptoed over to the package of opened crackers and immediately began chewing on the edge of one of the crumbs. There was an immediate relief to her discomfort as her vision seemed to clear up around the edges. It was only now that she realized the magnitude of where she was and what she was doing. The bedside table was surprisingly sparse, most likely because it needed to be cleared to give the boys room for the medical supplies, and Ashlynn was sitting in plain view of both beds. While the two boys seemed to be sound asleep, the two young humans were still both within arm's reach of the bedside table. It was terrifying. From where she was sitting, Ashlynn could see the rise and fall of the bed covers while the boys slept. The youngest, Ray, had his back to the bedside table while Dorian was facing her. It made Ashlynn's hair stand on end. Every nerve in her body screamed to run, that this was a bad idea, but neither of them seemed to be at risk of waking at any point soon.
Just get what you need and get out. You're in no condition to fight or run right now.
Ashlynn swallowed, wincing as the soreness of her throat flared up, and made her way over to the medicine cup. It was mostly barren, except for a few large drops of this strange, dark teal liquid. Her head swirled again as she leaned over and dipped some of the liquid into her cupped hand. Just then, she felt her blood run cold as she heard the youngest inhale sharply and deeply. A massive shuffle of covers created a mountain in a moment. Ashlynn's entire body shuddered as she watched Ray roll from one side to the other. Her heart thundered against her ribs, making her hands shake more than the fever had over the past few days, but she couldn't bring herself to move. All she could do was watch in horror and wait with bated breath as the boy shifted 2 more times before lying still. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The boy's features relaxed, and after a few moments, he was sound asleep again. At least, Ashlynn hoped he was asleep.
Too close. Too close. Take the meds and get out.
Ashlynn tried breathing in the liquid to see whether or not it had some suspicious odor, but Ashlynn couldn't tell anything through her stuffy senses. She'd never taken anything like this before, so she was uncertain of what to expect. The borrower figured that it couldn't be worse than anything else she'd ever taken before. Still feeling lightheaded, Ashlynn didn't have the luxury of time. She pressed the liquid bubble to her lips and sucked in, swallowing harshly twice before the taste hit her. It was the most vile thing she'd ever tasted, and she now understood why the boys' faces had twisted the way they did when they took the medicine. The liquid was thick and had an odd, minty taste to it, followed by something that reminded her of Christmas decorations. An uncomfortable warmth coated her throat and made her insides churn. Ashlynn couldn't stop her body from reacting, whether it was because the reaction was that strong or because she was too weak to fight it. Ashlynn's body convulsed and vomit spewed from her mouth. She lurched once and then twice. On the third time, a tickle formed in the back of her throat, and she began coughing, spewing the few bits of cracker she'd managed to slip from the packet mere inches away. The room started to spin as she spat out the remnants of what little she had in her out of her mouth, when she heard a large shuffling sound.
Dorian? You okay?
The sound was right in front of her, and Ashlynn knew it was from the youngest boy. The child's voice was groggy and laden with sleep, but it was still obvious that he was waking up. Every instinct screamed that Ashlynn needed to run, and she wanted to. She wanted nothing more than to sprint to the edge, grab her secured line, and scurry to the safety that resided under the bedside table. And if her head weren't spinning like a top, she could have done just that. As it was, she couldn't tell the corner of the tissue box from the corner of the table where her safety line was. She stumbled forward and felt along the edge of the cardboard box, confusion setting in.
Dorian?
No. Curses, where is my line? How do I get out of here? This isn't good.
Dorian? Are you getting... What's the...
Ray's voice was louder and more clear now. Panic was setting in. Nothing was going right. She needed to get away, and fast. Ashlynn couldn't find the rope. She'd gotten turned around, and now she was exposed on the bedside table. She glanced over her shoulder only to see the chilling silhouette of the immense boy pushing himself up onto one elbow and looming forward toward her. Doing the only thing she knew how to do, she dived in between the bedside lamp and the tissue box, but not with enough time. She could just make out the little hairs on his arm as he turned the lamp on, which emanated a brilliant, pale white glow that stung Ashlynn's eyes. She hunkered down, shaking in her shoes, and hoped that the boy would think it was just part of a nightmare. Kids did that, right?
Oh, Ray, what's your problem? Turn off the light.
The older one, Dorian, was up now too. Ashlynn could barely see the mess of brown blonde hair poking out from under the covers as he too pushed himself upright.
Dorian, something's on the table. I just saw it. It's behind the tissue box.
Hissed Ray. Ashlynn's head pounded relentlessly as it seemed the blinding light above her glowed brighter. Her body shivered and ached while a tickle in the back of her throat threatened to enrage another coughing fit.
You're probably just dreaming,
grumbled Dorian.
No, I wasn't. I thought you were getting sick, and I saw something dart around the lamp by the tissue box. Come on, Help me look real quick,
said Ray.
No, please don't. I can't run. Can you stop being so loud?
Time was rapidly running out, and Ashlynn had no escape plan. The thought in her mind was keeping her immobile, and freezing was the last thing she needed to do right now. She didn't even realize it, but she'd been slowly backing up further and further, stabilizing herself on the lamp.
Fine,
moaned Dorian.
No, not fine. Please, just go back to...
Ashlynn didn't finish her thought. She couldn't. Not when she saw those 4 massive hands from the young boys rest on top of the table, one of them grabbing the tissue box, and the other scooting the lamp away from her. Ashlynn always thought about what it would be like to be seen. She had heard stories of it from other borrowers when growing up, but this was a whole new level of despair. Nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. The first thing she noticed was a pale blue eye, pupil nearly a pinpoint because of how the youngest peered around the lamp, spotting her from in between the lamp cover and the interior mechanisms. The distinct look in the child's eyes, from curiosity to discovery, was horrifying. Ashlynn didn't think she could get any smaller, but she still felt herself shrink under the human's gaze. Her stomach lurched again, and she doubled over as the last crumb vacated her body.
Whoa, did you hear that?
Asked the older boy.
Dorian, you've got to see this,
said Ray softly. From the combination of pain, sickness, and defeat, Ashlynn felt her eyes beginning to sting with what few salty tears she had available. The tickle in her throat spasmed her insides, and finally forced another coughing spasm. Thick mucus coated her throat as her chest constricted.
Whoa!
Ashlynn heard things moving all around her, which shook the table she was on. Her already fragile footing was shattered as she fell to her knees. Instinctually, she reached over and tried to snag her pin from her hip when a horrifying truth hit her. She'd forgotten her pin. In an effort to keep herself light and not have to carry so much weight, she'd left her pin at home. She had no weapon, no way to protect herself.
No. Please, no.
The lamp and tissue box parted in front of her, and, within a matter of seconds, the faces of the 2 young boys were clearly visible. Her heart thundered against her ribs, making her already sensitive lungs throb. She swallowed dryly, the remnants of upchucked acid still burning her throat, as she glanced back and forth between the 2 boys.
So, this is it?